Built-in builds is a feature in Jenkins where you don't have to run the builds on the same server, because by default this Jenkins master is available there. So we really don't want to trigger the builds all the time on the single server. We wanted to have the functionality or the setup in such a way that the builds can be triggered around different machines, different servers, and that's a kind of implementation which we are trying to really look forward here. So let's create the slave, the Jenkins slaves here. I have already got an server over here in this one, which is like simple Ubuntu virtual machine. So I'm going to use this virtual machine as a slave, so that rather than running the builds on the Jenkins master, I will be invoking it up onto the slave here. So let's go to the manage Jenkins, because in manage Jenkins we have the capability to add the nodes, like as many as slaves we can add it up over here. So you can go to the manage nodes and cloud. So here you will be having the settings where you can select that what exactly slaves you want to configure, you wanted to set up here. So by default master is available there, but we really wanted to create a new node. So you can say like new node here, and you can give it like as a slave here, that yes, we wanted to have a Jenkins slave. If not, you can give it like a Java hyphen build or a Java hyphen slave. So these kind of details you can provide, that what name of the slave you wanted to configure, you wanted to set up here. And once that is done, so what is happening is that we will be able to see like how the exact steps, how these executions or the setups are really going to be performed, and you will be able to get the desired output. So slave is what we are trying to do. We are trying to set it up over here so that we can talk about like how the setups can be done, and we can perform the different level of changes as such. So that's a kind of activity. Manage activity is what we are trying to do. We are trying to configure it up over here. So again, when we are performing these setups, so here we are just trying to see that how the different changes we can do, and we'll see the configurations that how these changes can be done or can be proceed next over here. So we'll say okay here, and then we'll move on to the steps where we really wanted to see like how these changes we wanted to perform, we wanted to ensure here. So we have the name already present here, and rest of the other things, other details you have to fill here, that how you really trying to use or really trying to implement here. Number of executors, how many parallel builds you want to trigger. So I can give it like a 2 or 3 values we can give. So here we can say slave machine for running Java build. So that's a description which we can provide. Now what is the root directory? Now we are going to use, we already have an active session to this slave machine here. So what I'm going to do is that you have the flexibility that if you feel you can create another user also, right? If you feel like I wanted to create another user like specifically for the Jenkins build, you can do that. But I already have this Ubuntu user, so I can reuse it in order to save time. So again, the paths are pretty clear. If I run the home directory, so slash home Ubuntu is the directory here. Ubuntu is the user. The only thing is that we have to set up the password, because this is AWS machine, so the cloud machines does not comes with the password. So we have to do that. Even if it's a genuine virtual machine available on premise also, so there also you have to set up the password. That's a part of the configurations. After that, we are going to select that how the connectivity should be done. So we are going for the SSH connectivity, right? For SSH, the things are very clear that we want to have the host credentials. So we need to put the username password so that we can establish the SSH connection. So URL or the the IP address is fine. I can get it from here. That slave Jenkins slave IP address is there, so I can just put up here. But username password is required. Username also, I know like it's Ubuntu, but it's not only sufficient. We need the password in order to authenticate from the Jenkins server to this slave here, and otherwise without that it will not work as such. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go and connect as a root ID, because I wanted to set up the password. So root is having the capability to create the users or manage the users. So I'm going to basically set the password for Ubuntu here. Any basic password you can put. I'm just putting password only here so that it's easy for me to update, to remember this. Now again, when you set up the username password, it's not sufficient, because these machines or new operating systems nowadays, we have the password protection that you cannot log in with the username passwords. You have to basically go and enable that feature so that it can get started, or it can start connecting to that part. So that's one thing which we wanted to achieve, we wanted to configure here. So for that, you don't have to do much, you just have to change this configuration here. So ssh etc sshd underscore config, this is a configuration file which we have got, and in this one we have to disable the password authentication. So right now, if you can see here, the password authentication is no, but we really wanted to achieve it in this way, that the password authentication should be yes, because this value specific is by default no. So I'm just changing that using a vi command. I'm changing this password authentication value as yes. That's what I'm trying to do. And once I'm saving this file, so what is going to happen is that again my file is modified, so I can just simply say service ssh restart. And this is something which I'm doing on the slave machine, not on the Jenkins server, because we are trying to connect from the Jenkins server to the slave here. So even if you're doing a history command here, I can do a quick revision over here that I did the password command for Ubuntu, then I changed this sshd underscore config file, and after that what I did is like I restarted the ssh service and I got the ssh service up and running. So that's the way that how the things really gets along there. Now we are all set. We know the username, password, we know the IP address. We can get started over here. Now here, if you have any credentials for the server, that's totally fine. You can select those, but right now I don't have any credentials available there. So you're going to add the credentials right away. So you click on the add button, you go to the Jenkins. Now here in the username, you're going to put the Ubuntu because that's a username which you wanted to connect, and the password here. So the password is password only, and that's what I'm trying to put. So here we are going to say that this is the slave credentials, right? Because you can give any ID or description. It's easy to identify the credential with the help of these ID and descriptions. So whatever the ID or descriptions you really wanted to provide, you want to configure, you can configure here. So that's something which you're trying to do. And once this is done, then you can just say simply say add, and here in the drop down you will be having the option to select this credentials, and this credentials is required because when you're going to do the connectivity from the Jenkins server to the client to this particular machine, you really need the credentials and the IP addresses there. One more thing is there that when you're going to run this agent, you need the Java runtime. So usually when you create a server, so the Java runtime is not available. So as you can see, like if the Java runtime is there, that's fine, but we have to install it. You have all these options that you can run, or you can run this couple of apt commands in order to install it, because Java is not there. So let me do this. So let me go for the default -gre. So we are going for the JRE. JDK is also required for the compilation, but for the specific agent, JRE is more than sufficient. So we are going to spin up the agent. We'll see like how the agents can be configured. But we'll also try to do the JDK installation, because down the line when we are trying to configure the Jenkins build, so we need the JDK also. So let me try that also after the JRE installation. So JDK and JRE both is required. The command is simple. Instead of JRE, I just have to replace as JDK, and the JDK installation will be done. And the Java C, both command lines should be installed there. So we'll do the verification also once these packages really gets deployed. So it's getting installed here, and here we go. So JDK also we are going for the JDK part, and that will also be downloaded here. So both the package you really need, because without that it will not work there. So meanwhile this is going on, so we can go around and we can see like if we can really invoke our agent, because ultimately the pre-request has been done. We have done all the configurations which is required, so everything is done. Now usually when we connect to a virtual machine, so we try to verify the host, but again here we don't want to do that part, because we don't want to verify the host. So you can go for non-verifying, the non-verification strategy over here, so that your slave connection does not get disconnected. Yes, so we can do that. And yes, as this is the one which we do, and then we say yes, save. So you will see the from the logs like whether the invoke is going on. So you can see like it's pretty much connecting there. The SSH authentication is successful. If there is any kind of issue with the username password, you have to change that. You have to fix on that part there. It also picked up the JDK 11 version, and you can see like the slave is pretty much up and running. So if you click on nodes now, you will be able to see it up and running there. So now we are all good to run the builds, but again, like I told you that these builds, we are not going to invoke it up onto the Jenkins master. These will be on slave machine there. So let's create a new job. Distributed builds. We are going to create a Jenkins job with the name that. Now in this one, let's have a dummy one. Just in the build part, we can include a small step running just a simple echo command running builds, nothing much, right? So we are just going to give this as a basic simple job here. So we just say save and run it up here. Now when you run the Jenkins build over here, so what is happening is that in the build logs you will be able to know like who exactly triggered it, and you will also be able to see like the running on sys as system, and then it says building remotely on slave, right? Building remotely on slave. Now I have not configured any ways that this slave should be picked up. So how exactly this slave got picked up over here? Because of the automated configuration. So if you reconfigure your slave, in the bottom there is a setting which says one is the availability that keep this agent online as much as possible. You can select that is if the agent bring the agent when it's in demand and take it offline when it's idle. So you can follow these steps also. But there is another configuration where it comes to the users, use this mode as much as possible. So we are enforcing that this slave can be used as much as possible. Even if a Jenkins master is there, so it can use this slave configuration, which is wrong because in your organization you will be having a lot of slave machines, and you don't want other projects to use your slave machines as such. So in that case, what you do is that we say that okay, this is not something which is required. So we say that only build jobs with the label expressions, or only those jobs where we are configuring that we wanted to run the builds on these slaves should be utilized here. So you can configure that part here, and then you can save it up. It's just because we configured the slave, and it was something which was open for everyone. So that's why it automatically picked up the Java slave. Let's see with another build. So in the second build, again, it's fixed on. So now whatever because this Jenkins job, I have not configured it to run on the slave machine. So you can see here that now it started working on the master, and you run any number of build, 2, 3 builds you run, you will see like it's always going to be triggered on the master only, because I removed that flexibility that the Jenkins needs to use this node as much as possible. Yes, if you feel you don't want to run it on the master machine, so you can configure the Jenkins job, and you can select the option called restrict where this project can be run. So here we can go for the slave. So you can define that yes, we have a slave machine here, right? So whatever the pattern you have got, so you can give that our pattern is java hyphen slave, so you can select that pattern. So it says that okay, it matches one node machine. Sometimes with the same pattern 2, 3 node machines are there, but that's fine because we really feel like the pattern we are giving, but ultimately whatever the slave is available, the build should be up and running on that. So that's what we are specifying here. And once you save it up here, this time if you run the build, you will see that it's not getting invoked on the Jenkins master. Ultimately it's getting invoked on the Jenkins or the Java slave over here in this one. So that's the way that how the whole build process is executed. And when we are running this builds, it's not executing or running onto the Jenkins master, but eventually it's getting executed on the slave machines here as such. So that's a kind of a benefit which we are going to get over here when it comes to this overall distributed builds here. So this is the way guys that how the distributed builds really happen over here in this one. So that's it for this demo guys.